mystery. A paranormal perfect storm known simply as Monsterland. The Monsterland podcast is recorded live in an undisclosed location somewhere in the heart of high strangeness, just outside of Monsterland, Massachusetts. And now, here are your hosts. Paranormal author, researcher, and speaker, Ronnie LeBlanc. And the host of The Curse of Oak Island, drilling down on history, Maddie Blake.
Someone, sometime, did something underground on an island in Nova Scotia. We don't know who. We don't know why. We don't know what. We don't know when. And quite frankly, Ronnie, we don't know where. I'm talking about Oak Island. And tonight's guest is executive producer of Oak Island, Joe Lessard. And I'm pumped.
I am excited.
Right?
Awesome.
Welcome back to Monsterland. We are overwhelmed after only one episode. Everyone following.
We're worldwide now. Episode 2.
Actually, tonight for our interview, we solicited questions to you guys out there, and we got questions literally from all over the world. So we're just so excited. Please share it with a friend if you like it. If you're into the paranormal and you're just finding us, share it. We're everywhere. We're on social media. Yep. Ronnie, where are we on social media?
So Facebook, at Monsterland Podcasts, Twitter, Instagram, Snap, we're at Monsterland Pod.
Last week's episode was unbelievable. Nick Redfern, and just if you're finding us now because of Oak Island, I think we're going to have a lot of Oak Island fans, Acorns, as we call them, listening to this episode for the first time. We are called Monsterland because we sit on the outskirts here of Massachusetts of a 5,000 plus acre state forest, which is known locally as Monsterland, because it's a paranormal perfect storm, as the intro says, of all kinds of paranormal activities. Everything from ufology, cryptozoology, even some stories about demonic activity.
Yep.
Suicides, a rash of suicides and that. So right here in this town, military experiments, there's a military base nearby. So right here is kind of representative of everything in the paranormal sphere. And so we are based here, but we talk about paranormal around the globe, around the planet.
Everywhere.
We are going to be mobile. We're going to go do episodes at various haunted locations and stuff. So we're both natives of this area, right outside of Boston. Yep. So this is a perfect opportunity, and perfect place for us to be, right outside one of the most haunted and spooky areas in the country.
And we're passionate about this stuff.
Yeah.
Right? So this is pretty exciting stuff to share this with everybody globally now.
Absolutely. And tonight's guest, Joe, really gets into Oak Island, his personal experiences on the island, and even a little paranormal stuff, which they don't talk about a lot. So for those of you who are excited about that aspect of the mystery, definitely stay tuned. But why don't we, first of all, if you heard my rant from last week, I want to just make one amendment. I'm prone to rant. As you will learn listening to this podcast. I went off on being post-skeptical, and I got a little bit of heat for that. And I guess maybe I didn't preface it enough by saying, of course, it's assuming that we are going to be also not duped by everything.
Right.
I was talking to, us sane believers.
Yeah. And I don't think you have to apologize for it. I think it was.
All right.
I think it was.
All right. People took me to task. Yeah. Like, if we're not skeptical, then. But listen, what I'm saying, it's a spirit. Right. I was talking about a spirit, a state of mind.
Correct.
Of let's stop again. I'm going to go off another round here. Let's just stop apologizing for being believers. That's all.
Right.
And like I said, if you get burned once or twice, so what? But let's talk about it. Let's be vocal, because right now, as we said, now is the time. And to that end, this very week that we record this, more news has broke.
Unbelievable. More
stories have come out. And Ronnie, we have here a document that we need to get to. The actual military report on this TicTac UFO phenomenon. We're going to dive into this. This is just incredible.
It's amazing.
And you've really spent a lot of time with this, so we'll talk about that. But before we do that, why don't we open a Monsterland case file?
Sure.
And we'll dive into this whole thing and how it ties into something that's happened locally here. But before that, it's like a double tease. I figured it would be great for us because I think we're going to get some new listeners who are into Curse of Oak Island. I think it would be great if we kind of shared just a touch of our personal stories, our personal journeys.
Yeah.
So why don't we, listen, you and I have had many paranormal experiences. We're both experiencers.
Right.
Why don't we just start with one? Because again, this is going to be a long journey together.
Yeah.
We're going to do many, many episodes of this. So why don't we start with the basics? What was your first paranormal experience that you ever had that got you either interested in this or maybe repelled you at first because you were frightened by it?
Well, I think if we kind of went back a little bit just with where Monsterland came from, in the 50s, late 50s, the legend has it that this guy came into a bar, was frantic, told the manager that he saw a terrifying monster by Old Mill Road.
So this is right outside the Monsterland forest.
Right.
And he comes running into a bar. What year is this?
So this is in the 50s at some point. No one really knows when. It was sometime in the summer.
Okay.
And he's, this is Leominster. There's no cell phones. And so he finds the nearest establishment, goes into this bar and tells him, I saw this monster as I'm going by this bridge. And he says, call the police. So the manager's kind of staring at this guy like, what is he talking about?
Monster.
Right. And he realizes after a little bit here, this guy's pretty serious and he's kind of freaking out. So he calls the Leominster Police Department. They come down. He's waiting for them. He doesn't want to wait anymore. He says, I'm going to go back. I'm going to show everyone, prove to everybody that this thing is real. This is a real monster that I saw. He goes back to the spot. Well, the police show up at the bar. He's no longer there. The manager says, this guy came in, says he saw something, some kind of monster by the bridge on Old Mill Road. Can you go down there? So they kind of chuckle. They show up. Well, lo and behold, they find the guy's car. The lights are on. The car's running. Doors open, but there's nobody there. So they just think that he's out in the woods, probably stepped off. So they waited a few minutes. 5 minutes goes by. 10 minutes goes by. He doesn't show up. So they start to kind of check the perimeter and look around. They can't find him. The guy disappears. So this was like that legend of Monsterland when this started, where someone saw a Bigfoot creature and they disappeared. And then when I talked to locals in the area, they said, what's interesting? These old timers.
They were around at that time.
They were
Guys,
around that
witnesses
time.
you spoke to.
Yeah. Now, what's interesting is they say, before this incident happened, this wasn't called Monsterland. And I said, what was it called? And they said, the UFO landing area.
Wait a second. Hold on.
The UFO landing area was the name of this spot.
So now, once again, we have a possible tie or connection between UFOs and Bigfoot, which is what a lot of Bigfoot people don't like.
Right.
The people who are into
they're
it's a
separate
North American
camps.
great
Yep.
ape, undiscovered ape, has nothing to do with UFOs. It's not paranormal,
No.
but we have right here, right outside these walls. Wow.
Unbelievable.
Was there police? Did you see like a police report? Was there documentation
I
on
did
that
some
story?
digging. I couldn't find anything. So, I kind of looked at it. Is this just some kind of fictitious story?
Sure.
But as I started digging into more encounters and all that, people were seeing a Bigfoot type creature in that area. People were seeing UFOs. So it kind of goes on and on. And this is where it kind of led into my first experience. So when I was a kid, I used to take my bike and go to Monsterland. And we would meet different friends up there, ride our bikes. And I would go by this certain trail every time, and it would just give me the heebie-jeebies, man. I would see this place, and it had like 2 trees on either side of the trail. So it looked like this prehistoric gate. And I would ride my bike. And
How old are you about at this point?
I must have been, 10 or 11.
And you got a bad feeling
Every time.
driving by that?
Every time. I would ride my bike, and I would pedal a little bit faster. Well, one day I was feeling a little ballsy, and I decided, I'm going to go down that trail. So I got up to the entrance of the trail, kind of a little bit of an incline, so I jumped off the bike and walked it in. As I started walking in, the trail got narrower and narrower, but I got this instant feeling of being watched. And, the hair on the back of your neck kind of goes up. It doesn't feel right. And as I keep on, I get on the bike a little bit, I start going through, and you can hear it, just this squeaking sound of my wheels and kind of going through. And then I stopped because I could hear nothing. There were no squirrels, no birds, no animal life. It was just dead quiet. So that got me more freaked out. So I started just kind of standing there, but I wanted to kind of move forward, but there was almost like a mental block where I couldn't move. And as I stood there looking forward, place is silent. I'm like, I need to get out of here, but I couldn't move. I was like frozen. The forest erupts in front of me, like just a few yards away. And it felt like a elephant was literally stomping through the woods. I saw trees move in front of me, but I could not see anything. I could feel from the soles of my feet, my chest, like boom, boom, boom. I couldn't see anything, and it tripped me out. As soon as it was gone, I kind of regained, and I jumped on my bike, and I freaking pedaled out of there so fast. And I was going home thinking, what was that? Was that a moose? Was that a deer? Like, I didn't see anything, so it really bugged me.
And you had no context in your young mind of Bigfoots, or you had nothing
exactly.
to...
It did not enter my head at all.
You didn't write a book called Monsterland when you were 10.
No. I totally forgot about it. And as I started, kind of getting back into it, I moved back home. I was in California for a while, and hearing other, people's stories, that popped back in my head like an epiphany. Like, man, what if that was some kind of encounter? Because people talk about them having this visibility, the cloaking ability that they have.
Everything you describe, and this is why this is so compelling to me. Everything you describe, you come to learn when you study this stuff, is like cliche for people that have Bigfoot encounters.
Feel like they're being watched.
Boom.
The forest goes quiet.
Boom.
No animal life anywhere.
Paralyzed with fear, or paralyzed, feeling like you're discombobulated, all that stuff.
Literally felt like there was some kind of a mental wall, like this block. I could not move forward. And I don't know why. I just stopped and looked straight ahead. But it was almost like where I was looking is where this thing just erupted. And I'm trying to find what is the source. It was like Predator is the best way I can explain it. Not like I saw the shimmering thing, but there was nothing there, and there should have been something there big, and I didn't see it. And that freaked me out. To this day, it still freaks me out.
And ironically, you got as jacked as Arnold Schwarzenegger. So
yes,
the Predator analogy is perfect. Right. And that's just the beginning of your paranormal journey. So we'll stop there for now. Like I said, this is a long play here. My first experience was, as a little kid, my grandmother, I'm all Irish. I think I have a little English in me somewhere. But everyone came over from Ireland, from the old country, and my grandmother would often talk about her mother. And I remember being very little in her kitchen, where it was the center of our universe, my grandmother's little kitchen in Natick, Mass. And she would talk about stories about her mother. And I remember like old Irish stories about her mother, kind of what she was describing when it was like precognitive dreams. But I had no way to conceptualize that. But my mother she would talk about her mother screaming, having screaming dreams or something. She had a phrase for them, which I can't recall. And then my grandmother had a quote unquote ghost in her kitchen that she even named Bridget. And she would talk about it like she was talking about making lunch. Like,
wait, would she talk to the ghost in front of you?
Yeah, she'd say, "Oh, Bridget, not today. Not today." And then at one point, I remember there was a picture that things kept coming off the wall. So they put a hook for a frame that you to remove the picture, you'd have to like pick it up and lift it off the thing. Okay. No sooner had they hung something there, they just hear slap, slide, like the thing come off the hook, hit the kitchen floor, and slid across the kitchen floor. And my grandmother was like, "Okay, Bridget, we won't hang anything there." So I grew up kind of with that in the back of my mind. But honestly, because it was treated so cavalierly, I didn't sit there and go like, "Oh, Nanny's got a ghost." I just kind of was like, it was another story in your family.
It's like a natural.
Right. Yeah. So, but then I do remember her talking about dreams. And she had one recurring dream where she would be carrying someone. And when she was carrying someone, she was running through like a field or something, and she could never see whose face it was. And she would look down and she would just know this person was in trouble, but she could never see whose face it was. And when she had that dream, within 24 to 72 hours, someone that she loved or knew very closely would pass.
Wow.
So when she had it, she would get very upset. And I wish I remembered more details about it, but I just know that was told to me. So when I was very young, I had a book of mysteries, and this will come into play later. I'll explain all this, but one of the mysteries in this, 100 mysteries around the world was Oak Island.
Wow.
Which fascinated me as a kid, a show I ended up working on years later. But I had this book, and I was into that type of stuff. And I had it sounds silly, but I had a pet parakeet. And this pet parakeet and I had this weird, and I've heard bird owners claim this type of thing before with parakeets. We had a psychic connection. I'm telling you, like I would literally, you can ask anyone in my family, you know my family. Yeah. I could say like, time for bed. He would fly into the room, fly right in his cage. He would fly on my shoulder on command. He was unbelievable. So I had this unbelievable relationship with this stupid bird. And I was in junior high. I think I was 10 or 11, about the same age you had yours.
Wow.
And so all that grandmother stuff was not ever on the front of my mind, but it was there. And I went to bed one night and I had one of the most 5 vivid dreams I've ever had in my life. And in the dream, I take my bird to school. And I'm showing my friends the bird, and he got loose. And I'm running through the halls. I'm looking for him. I'm calling him. And then I see them at the end of a hall. I run down this long hall, and there he is. And he's in the dream, he's dead. And I pick him up, he's lifeless. I'm like, no. And I wake up. And it was so real. And I woke up and I looked around my room. I go, oh my God, it was a dream. And I walked over to his cage, and he was dead on the floor of the cage.
Out.
And it scared me so much that I immediately rejected, almost on the spot. I might even said out loud, I was like, no, I don't want this. I don't want this in my life. No. And I did. I thought of my grandmother, and I was like, nope.
So that came in your mind, though.
Yeah.
Your grandmother,
I don't remember.
stories.
I don't remember how immediate it happened, but I know I had that thought. I remember having that thought, like, no, God, please, no, Jesus, get it out of it. I don't want it. And I rejected everything paranormal or weird. I threw that book away. It was just, I wanted none of it. But it continued to dog me throughout my life. And I had a full body apparition experience, which we'll get into later. And then the floodgates were opened later in my life.
What's remarkable is that your grandmother's dreams, it sounds very shamanic. Like she's helping, kind of carrying their soul, not knowing who it is, but kind of, guiding someone. It's interesting, and it seems that you got that same gift that was passed down.
As you know, I've had some recently, very recently in my family. And I'm calling them, and I'll tell this story later in another podcast. Yeah. It's hard for me to talk about because I'll get emotional, and I'm a very emotional person.
But
and it's going on right now, and it's my mother who's passed, and I'm calling them, and this might be an expression, I don't know, I think I invented it.
I think you did.
Okay, I'm calling them empathy dreams. My mother is... I don't want to make a fool of myself. She's making me feel the feelings of people around me so that I better understand them. That's what I'll say for now. Whew. We go now to the Monsterland case files, of which there are hundreds of reports in this area. We open tonight case file number 196701. This is the St. Leo's UFO of 1967, which hovered over St. Leo's Cemetery. Is that correct?
That's right. Yeah. So 1967, a couple's taking a drive. It's probably like 12:31 in the morning. And as they took off for like half an hour and they came back, they weren't drinking, they weren't doing any drugs or anything. They're in their 40s. They come back and they pass by St. Leo's Cemetery. And often in the distance, above the cemetery, what looked like a fire. They see this light and they see what looks like smoke or mist. So the husband turns the car around and says, honey, I think we got something. So he pulls up into the cemetery, broadside, only yards away from this thing, and they realize it's a craft. It's a classic flying saucer hovering over the cemetery, and there's like this mist or this fog, and it was kind of like bluish color. He gets out of the car. He points to these. He's like, look at this. As soon as he points his arm up at the UFO, it was almost like this magnetic force threw his hand back on top of the roof of the car, and he couldn't move. And slowly, this UFO rocks back and forth, and then makes this whirring sound, slowly takes off, and then shoots off. Maybe about 20 seconds later, he kind of regains his, control of his arm and gets back in the car. So he's still a little shooken up. And they drive to the house. They're freaking out. He tries to pull into the driveway. Well, he still kind of doesn't have full control. He goes into the garage through the door, like crashes into the house. So now it's like 2 a.m. And the first thing they did is they called their parents. Now, think of this for a second. Think of this for a second.
Right.
If this is, fake, who you're going to call your parents at 2:30 in the morning and say, hey,
grown
guess
adults
what I just saw you
in 1967?
No. So they called, I think, his parents, and his mom was like, you got to call the police. Just call them. And then his wife did the same thing, and they had this officer, Lieutenant Ciccolini.
All documented, by the way. All these cases are documented.
He came, knew the couple, interviewed them up until about 4:30 in the morning.
Good.
And said they are telling the truth. They saw something. They're visibly shaking. This is a seasoned police officer who knows when someone's lying or telling the truth.
Right.
He said they're telling the truth.
Well, you can read more about that case in Ronnie's book, Monsterland, case 196701. And this ties in beautifully to the unbelievable news that broke this week nationwide and worldwide.
Yeah.
The now infamous TicTac UFO released from the government. As I said last week in last week's episode, Ronnie, we are living through disclosure, I think, right now. We don't realize it even, in a way, how shocking this is. And just this week, more information came out about this story. You've actually printed up the government report.
This is the report, full, all the details from the Navy, assessment, talking about what happened. And this goes back to, it's amazing, 2004, and we're hearing about it 14 years ago.
Let me just reset in case, again, we have some Oak Island people who might not know this type of stuff. In the December of 2017, video is released of fighter pilots chasing an anomalous flying craft that they could not explain, moving at rapid speed. The classic video that we all craved in ufology for years, that we knew existed but never saw, at least not from the government. It was released.
Correct.
And now, based off that, all this new information is coming out, and this report has been released. It tells us a lot of things, like this was going on. This was actually stalking a Navy vessel, this thing was.
Right.
So what are some of the most shocking, you've spent a lot of time with this document, Ronnie. What are some of the most shocking elements of it that you read?
I think right off the bat is how they talked about this craft. Like I said, it was kind of messing with the USS Nimitz 3 or 4 times over a course of like several days. And what they were seeing is, and the reason they call it a TicTac UFO, it literally looked like a TicTac.
46 feet long, I think they said.
Yeah, about 50 feet long.
Which is ridiculous.
Ridiculous. There was no sign of wings or anything, just a smooth white surface. It went from 60,000 feet to 50 feet in a matter of like seconds, which is impossible. And there's no way. So they called out these F-18 Hornets to track it. They would catch it on radar for a little bit, and then they would lose it. They just couldn't keep up with this thing. And so they chased it. This is a few of the key assessments that came out that really blew me away. And again, if you're looking for UFOs, you should start searching for anomalous aerial vehicle, because that's how they're classifying these things.
So in this report, they call it anomalous aerial vehicle, AAV.
Correct.
Thereby, if you do a search for UFO, you ain't going to find anything.
Not gonna find
Again, the government's super smart. Before you get to those individual pieces of the shocking details of that report, I'm wondering if Carrie and David, our producers, can insert here a little bit of sound of the pilots actually interacting with this thing. Listen to this. These are fighter pilots for the U.S. Navy.
Correct.
Interacting with this TicTac UFO. Check this out.
Dude, there's a fucking drone, bro. There's a whole fleet of them. Look on the ASA. My gosh. They're all going against the wind. The wind's 120 knots from the west. Look at that thing, dude. That's not our LNS though, is it? It's not. That is the LNS, dude. Well, if there's like... Look at that thing. It's rotating.
So
Stunning.
Crazy. What floored me, okay, is that the key assessments from the military, they stated, there's three of them, they highlight about six, but these three really stood out. The anomalous aerial vehicle, the AAV, is no known aircraft or air vehicle currently in the inventory of the U.S. or any foreign nation.
Okay, again, secret military document, flat out saying this ain't ours and it ain't anyone else's.
Right. The other piece, and this is pretty wild, the AAV possibly demonstrated the ability to cloak or become invisible to the human eye or human observation.
This is unbelievable.
Is this science
This is what we've been praying for. I mean, literally, if you went to a cocktail party 5 years ago as a believer and talked about cloaking devices in UFOs, everyone would be like, "Oh, awesome! Yeah, I'm gonna go get a gin and tonic." Matty's gonna go out there and talk to himself by the pool. Now, there's a government document.
And then check this one out. This is what the other piece of the puzzle here is that when the fighter pilots, F-18 Hornets, were trying to keep up with this thing, at one point, one of the fighter jets was following it, and they noticed this disturbance in the water, almost like a submarine or something coming up, and it was the shape of a circle like a flying saucer. They think that it was actually trying to either dock or connect with this, and this is the third piece here. The AAV possibly demonstrated a highly advanced capability to operate undersea, completely undetectable by our most advanced sensors. So is there some kind of, are they under the ocean? Are they hiding? I mean, that's...
Well, reports of USOs
Right.
Are ubiquitous in ufology. You know, for years, people saying these things are coming out of the ocean or the water. So there you go. And this is the government saying it.
So this is, and there's more to this. This video and the audio that we had just played was from December. So I think there's going to be more about this case coming out as well as others, and it's pretty mind-blowing stuff.
Well, you know what I think these things are. I've told you before. I think there is a paranormal aspect to the UFO phenomenon. I think they are what the Bible calls. We'll get into this, and then we'll have an author on who specializes in this stuff. But I kind of subscribe to the fallen angels, demonology aspect of this. I think they are posing as benevolent aliens, but they are spiritual beings. They are basically demons. That's just my belief. At least a portion of them are.
Right.
Well, you think I'm crazy? How about this aspect of newly released documents in the last few days? Pentagon's secret UFO program investigated poltergeist connections. Pentagon's UFO program investigated possible connections to poltergeists and invisible entities and, quote, bizarre creatures. This is the Pentagon. Okay? The phenomenon, the investigation also involved looking at poltergeist activity, invisible entities, orbs of light, animal and human injuries, and much more. So basically, this goes on to say that they were looking at all types of different, this could be.
They're all connected, right? I mean, they're all either coming from the same place or they're made from this. There's some kind of connection through everything.
So it's unbelievable. And you know, it's funny. We were just talking about our first experiences.
Right.
Carrie, our producer's like, let me tell you about how my father's communicating with my family who passed.
Right.
It just goes on and on. Everyone has a story. And by the way, we want to hear your story.
Love to hear your story.
So I believe we have the technology, although we don't have TicTac technology to go from 60,000 feet to 50 feet. We do have the technology for you to leave us messages. How can people do that? If you have a story you want us to feature here, how can people do that? We have an email, don't we?
Yes, they can send an email to monsterland@pod617.com and shoot us a note. We'll share your story, your experiences. We're not going to be the ones that are going to be ridiculing you. We're here to listen.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
We're advocates for you because, as we've established, we are experiencers. We also very shortly are going to have the ability for you to leave us actual audio messages where you can tell your stories.
That'd be great.
And we'll listen to those live. All right, speaking of listening to compelling people tell their stories, you've all been waiting for it. An executive producer of History Channel's smash, The Curse of Oak Island, Joe Lessard, joins us now in Monsterland. Joe Lessard, thank you for entering into Monsterland.
Well, it's great to be in Monsterland, Maddie Blake. How are you doing, sir?
Well, I miss you. I miss the island. I miss the whole team. But we're doing well.
Yeah, well, you are missed, and that's one of the things about Oak Island when you're there. I mean, no matter if you're there for a day or if you're there for several months, when you leave, you want to go back. It draws you back in.
There's no doubt it draws you back in. Say hi to my co-host, author Ronnie LeBlanc.
Hey, Joe.
Ronnie, how are you, sir?
Excellent. How are you? Thanks for being on the Monsterland podcast. We appreciate it.
Yeah, this is fun.
So, Joe, let's dive right into it. I have, by the way, literally questions from around the world here for you from Oak fans. You know I love to be the voice for the fans on the show, and we'll get into all that. But before we do, could you just kind of sum up what Oak Island is for those of us who might not know? Some people found this podcast and don't know anything about Oak Island. Could you kind of sum it up for us?
Yeah, absolutely. Oak Island is a 140-acre island in Nova Scotia in the North Atlantic, not too far from Maine, where people have been looking for some kind of mysterious treasure for 225 years now. It's gone from generation to generation. It's gone from company to company. Very serious investors and engineers and scientists and theorists and just people with passion for mystery have been working for centuries now, trying to figure out what may be buried on Oak Island and who may have put it there and for what reason. And they still don't know. All they know is they keep finding clues that tell them somebody went to a lot of trouble to protect something of great importance or value.
Joe, you're the executive producer on the show. How did you end up on this path? Hit show, History Channel, the executive producer. What was that first kind of opportunity to kind of get you down this road?
Well, two words: Kevin Burns. He is the founder of Prometheus Entertainment and the creator of the show, The Curse of Oak Island. And we were curious. We had come into knowing about the mystery. We actually did a segment about it, a 10-minute segment, in the first season of Ancient Aliens. And that just put it on our radar. We had been talking to some people at History Channel at the time about what would be cool to explore for new projects, and Oak Island came up. And Kevin Burns was curious what was going on with Oak Island. And all anyone knew at the time, this was around 2013, early 2013, all anyone knew was that it was really hard to make television about Oak Island these days because it was owned by two old guys, Dan Blankenship and Fred Nolan, and they hated one another and would not cooperate with each other or with television companies to do anything new. And so it had been left at that. Well, Kevin, tenacious and ingenious as he is, got somebody here in house to start doing some digging around, and they found a phone number for Oak Island Tours, called it up, and Rick Lagina answered the phone. And the rest is History Channel.
Just that simple sometimes. Well, it wasn't that simple because I know, Joe, there's Tale of a Dinner. And I always say this to fans too, like, these guys would be there whether the cameras are rolling or not. They are fully committed to this. And didn't they at first kind of have some reservations about even doing the show?
They still have reservations.
I was trying to be gentle. Yeah.
No. Rick and Marty Lagina have been partners with Dan Blankenship and some other partners, Craig Tester, Alan Kostrava, since 2006. Dan's partner at the time, David Tobias, they approached David, who was looking to sell out his portion of the island, and Rick, who has followed this story religiously since he was a child in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan since 1965, when he read a Reader's Digest article, has been enthralled by the mystery. And so he followed it throughout decades, throughout the years, very closely. And his younger brother, Marty, who as a child always looked up to Big Brother Rick, and the two of them would get in their own little childhood play mysteries and always fantasize about one day, would they have their shot at Oak Island? And I think it was always sort of a romanticism. It was nothing that I think they ever endeavored as young people to ever realistically come to fruition. Maybe Rick did in his heart. I don't know. But as fate would have it, they found themselves, middle-aged and with the resources collectively to actually do it. And so they approached Dan Blankenship, they approached David Tobias, and they made it happen. And in 2006, they partnered with Dan, and started getting going. But back then, there's a law in Canada that governs treasure hunting, and there's only one place in the entire country, I believe, where you can hunt for treasure, at least in the province of Nova Scotia, and that's Oak Island, and it's the Oak Island Act. And so they had to work with the government. They had to go through a lot of different hurdles and legal hoops to cooperate and get permission, and they did. So the first several years that they were doing things up there, it was more minor stuff. I mean, they drilled some boreholes. They ingratiated themselves with the province as much as they could. They got an archaeologist to scour the island, and got them permissions to actually start their own explorations. And they had just renewed their treasure trove license. I think it went away on them for a period there, and then they had just renewed it when we got a hold of Rick Lagina. And it was, like you said, Maddie, it was not so easy. We didn't make a deal on that phone call with Rick. He was intrigued about the notion of a documentary on Oak Island because Rick loves that history, and there's so much rich history. There's so many stories and so many people and so many important finds that have been made and so many important efforts that have been made and some pretty incredible tragedies that have happened in the pursuit of that treasure. And so Rick was, thinking the story absolutely should be promoted, should be told, should be retold, but he couldn't really wrap his brain around why anyone would care to see it from his point of view. And so Kevin and myself traveled to Traverse City, Michigan to meet with Rick and Marty and Craig Tester and Alan Kostrava, and convince them why it was important for these two brothers from Michigan who had grown up with this mystery that was one of their life's, pie in the sky passions, to have that play out in reality, to see if they could crack this mystery that so many before them had tried and failed to do, would just make for incredible television right there, no matter what they found. Because Kevin could tell, and I could tell just from meeting them right away, that their story was one that people would want to follow. They're charismatic guys.
Yeah.
They have good hearts. They mean well. They love the island. They worship Dan Blankenship and the people that have come before them. And so we knew that they were going to be good stewards of the story. And we could tell that they came and they meant business. I mean, Marty Lagina comes from an engineering and oil background. He has technologies that he applies every day to make a successful business that would completely relate to treasure hunting and be applicable on Oak Island, looking for things in the ground. The weird thing is that those technologies don't seem to be so cut and dry on an island where they're trying to dig a 200-foot hole, and they keep on finding different reasons why things don't turn out the way they planned, versus drilling 2 miles down in the earth and actually finding natural resources. So that part of the island's been kind of hard for them to tackle, but that's how it all started.
You touch on something, Joe, that I want to follow up on, and you talk about the Laginas, and ostensibly it's a show about treasure hunt and the gold and all that, and that's all really compelling and exciting. But at its essence, this show is about family, as I see it, faith, relationships, brotherhood, and the pursuit of something that, in the face of the worst odds and defeat after defeat, the determination and the faith to keep moving forward, as Sly Stallone said in Rocky V, to keep moving forward. And that is so inspiring to me. So I wanted to get personal here for a minute, if I could. Could you explain to people listening, you are embedded on that island when you were there. The crew lives together. I've seen it firsthand, and I consider you guys like family. We've become like a family and friends. Talk about the Lagina brothers, your relationship with them, Joe, and some things about them that maybe people don't see on TV, and some things that people maybe should know about them.
Honestly, I would say pretty much what you see on television is who they really are. Rick is kind of a private guy. That's why he sort of shies away from, even though he's great on camera. He's so charismatic.
Yeah.
He's actually a very he's actually a very personal person. He likes his privacy. He's not a very outgoing person. But he loves to engage. What's great about Rick on the island that I think people would like to know is that when he's in a great position to share dreams with people, because Oak Island encompasses so much of that notion about striving to do something incredible with your life and with your time. And it is more than a treasure hunt. It's about trying to tell a story and solve a great mystery that no one really even, it's a mystery what the mystery is even about, because there's so many different
Right.
It's true. It's true.
about what the treasure could be. But Oak Island means so much to so many people. And you said that there's people from all around the world listening and who are submitting questions.
Yep.
That's how far this little island reaches. And so what I would say about both Rick and Marty is they're dream sharers, and they constantly hear things now that they're out there in the world and people are aware of their efforts, and they like to share that with people. They've got a great interpretive visitor center on the island that they opened up, where they house artifacts that have been found on the island, but they also use it to greet the public and give tours of the island. And as much as Rick likes to think he shies away from that kind of stuff, it's amazing to watch him interact with the public.
Yeah.
And it's amazing to watch Rick interact with the public and share that with people, and Marty too. They're very, very giving and gracious in that respect, because I think they understand that as hard as they're working and as much as they're putting into this financially, and all the hard work that goes with it, I think that they see it as a privilege to also fulfill the curiosity and the wishes of other people. And they do it all the time. They're very, very giving guys. There is a lot of, time-consuming TV production that goes into it. So there's always a push and a pull about, that process. But I love spending time with them. I love playing euchre with them. Although I think that, whether it's fate or some kind of eerie paranormal power they have, I've not been able to beat them yet in the game, but I will get them. No, I mean, I love it. Oak Island is a great. It's kind of a weird place to work because it's so much fun. I mean, it's hard work. It's rough work. You got to watch out. You got to face every kind of element. One thing about Nova Scotia is the weather will change 3 times in one day. So you're always having to deal with rain or wind or blaring sun, and then cold and then warm, and it's an endless cycle that tests you. But at the same time, you go home every day, especially when they make a find, and you're like, I can't believe I got to do that today, and I can't wait to go back and do it again tomorrow. And part of that is spending time with Rick and Marty, because they're great guys, and everyone involved, all their partners, all their friends that are helping. They're great people.
I was standing one morning there early. It was like an early call, and this is like, I don't know, second or third year, on the island. And so, my relationship with Rick and Marty grew, and they started trusting me. And, I think at a certain point, I was like a made man. You know what I'm saying, Ronnie? Like, they were like, all right, not only does he not mean us any harm, he is a cheerleader for the show. He might be the cheerleader for the show.
Absolutely.
So I was standing out there one morning, Joe, and by the causeway, like kind of just running lines in my head. And it's just me. And Rick kind of comes walking out, and he gives me that look, that kind of Templar look, that Knights Templar look. He has that faraway look, and he goes, puts his hand on my shoulder, and he goes, "You really believe, don't you?" And I said, "In this island?" And he said, "You really believe something's here, don't you?" And I said, "I do, and I joked. I said, "Yeah, but I'm a little crazy like that." And he didn't laugh, and he goes, "No, it's not crazy." And he points to the bridge, and he goes, "To cross that bridge, you got to have faith. If you want to cross that bridge, you got to have faith." I get a little emotional talking about it. And so, Joe, I'm wondering for you, with everything you've seen, all the ups and downs of being there, the incredible highs and the frustrations, where does your faith in Oak Island stand right now?
I'm a person that grew up with an imaginative brain, and I've grown up with numerous sort of fantasy type scenarios that I hoped my life would lead to. You know what I mean? And probably everybody does, but I was kind of fixated on it as a young person, and so I think, like you say, you're crazy like that. I think I'm a little crazy like that. No offense to Rick, because for Rick, he's such a man of faith, as you just described. I entered this whole project and this opportunity and this job hoping and wanting it, wanting something to be found, wanting it to prove to be true, and getting into the process from season 1, and them finding that pirate coin from the 1600s in the swamp.
Yep.
And then going to Europe in season 2 and hearing these incredible stories from theorists who basically chart the path of the Knights Templar from France to Scotland, well, from the Holy Land to France to Scotland to Nova Scotia and Oak Island, and who knows from where after. And then you come back and it all culminates in last season, where just when you think, are we never going to find something in the Money Pit? Or are we never going to find something at Smith's Cove? Are we never going to prove this part of the story? They find something like that cross last year. And while it still remains a mystery as to what exactly that object means, you can see from everybody that handles it, whether it's a scientist or a treasure hunter like Gary Drayton, who's found things literally all over the world and has become very discriminating about what he pulls out of the ground. And then the testing that it's undergoing, even as we speak, testing is being done on that thing. I think it renews, it either gives you faith or it renews faith. And one of the barometers, this show is really about faith versus skepticism, faith versus tangible science. The belief, the want for history to be fulfilled with a great story which is Rick, versus Marty, who loves his brother and has that imaginative mind just enough to say, you know what, let's get in there together and try to crack this thing, but also who sits back and says, but you got to put it in my hand to prove it to me.
Yeah,
right.
And when you see that guy with his point of view hold the cross and then turn to his brother and say, when we first got into this thing, I wasn't sure that anything important ever happened on Oak Island. And now holding this thing, also coupled with the fact that they found human bones in the Money Pit 160 feet deep.
And parchment.
And parchment. He looks at his brother and he says, I'm now convinced that whatever may or may not still be here, something incredible happened. And, you're watching that through a monitor, outside the war room as this is being recorded, unprompted, unscripted, and like a tear kind of comes to your eye because you're like, this is incredible to see the human movement that happens, because it takes place not only in the crew who are there to witness all this stuff and try to and convey it to the audience, but you're watching these real guys who wake up that day not knowing what they're going to encounter that day. And when days like that happen, Maddie, your faith is either established or renewed.
That's incredible. One of the questions that we got was from Susan Stewart. You talked about the cross, and she had a question. She's calling in from Maine. She had a question about, has that been dated? Is there any indication of how old that is? I know you said it's in the process of being looked at now.
Her name's Susan?
Yeah, Susan Stewart from Maine.
Susan Stewart. Well, Susan, it's a great question that all of us are very very eager to find the answer for. And all I can say is stay tuned, because I believe that information is not only being worked on, but I think it's forthcoming.
Excellent.
Well, let's dive into the fan questions. But before we do, and by the way, I have held that cross in my hand.
Oh my gosh.
And it is, they're not words. You can feel it. You can feel it in your heart. It's something special, at least in my opinion. Before we dive into the fan questions, Joe, one last thing. Speaking of the cross and everything, it's a nice little segue into this question is like, where are things right now in terms of like, are you talking to the brothers? Where is everyone? Are they back in Michigan? What's going on with the team?
Well, that info is a little close to the vest right now.
Sure.
But all I can say is Rick and Marty are never going to give up looking, whether there's TV or not, I think there's always going to be something going on.
Right.
So, I mean, even when our television cameras go away for, breaks between seasons, the guys are still looking into stuff. So I can't speak to where they are right now in the world, but you can bet they're working on a mystery.
Love it. Love it. All right, let's dive into fan questions. There's tons of them. And when you got to go, Joe, you're a busy man making television. So let's get into these, Ronnie. Okay, this is Zelda on Instagram. Is the team planning on freezing the ground upcoming at any point, like was discussed last season? And also, anything going to be done further with the DMT shaft?
I mean, the freeze ring method, which is a method where they use a glycal substance and a lot of drilling to basically drill a circle of holes around a certain circumference of an area, and then they literally freeze the ground, right? So that and they can overcome these believed flood tunnels that feed in from either one or numerous spots along the island shore somewhere. So they're thinking the freeze method is the way that they're finally going to be able to excavate the money pit without having to deal with flood water. That is a process that has been investigated for now, I think, at least 30 years. I mean, David Tobias and Dan Blankenship were looking into quotes on how much it would cost to do that back in the 1970s and 80s, I believe.
Right.
And even back then, it was $1 million. It was in the several millions of dollars at least back then.
Right.
So you can only imagine how expensive that method would be today. It's something that's always sort of on the horizon in terms of maybe we'll try that. I can't say that that's something that I can't say whether or not the guys are realistically planning on that now, but it's certainly something that they're always considering. And if not that method, something that would be more practical and perhaps more logical in terms of how much you want to throw into one operation. And they continue to try other things, but the freeze ring method is always on the perimeter of the thought.
I always say to fans, Joe, if you've thought of it, trust me, they've thought of it, and it's being considered or looked into. You got one there, Ronnie?
I do. Talking about the tunnels, Cindy Bussey from Turner Falls, Mass., had a question. Could the artifacts that they found in the shaft have been sucked in through the tunnels instead of actually placed there?
I mean, potentially, but if they were sucked in from where? Sucked in from like a major vault of some kind or like a room down there. The weird thing about the geology on Oak Island is it's literally an island that's made up of two drumlins or land masses that are composed of different kinds of rock. The side of the island on the western side of the swamp leading toward the causeway is all slate, very hard rock. But on the eastern drumlin, where 10X and the Money Pit are, it's a kind of anhydrite sort of limestone type rock that not only could hold man-made cavities, but could also have natural solution cavities. So the ground's already kind of Swiss cheese in a way. But they have found evidence that some of those voids that have been found, like through drilling or through digging, are quite possibly man-made. So there could be some kind of, who knows if someone went down in the Money Pit when it was originally dug and repurposed natural features to supplement man-made features to create a maze of things. There's thoughts that Oak Island, if it holds treasure, it doesn't hold one treasure, but was perhaps one time known to certain individuals to be a treasure vault, like a bank where there's many places. So could an artifact that's drilled out of DMT have been deposited there or somehow gotten there by being pushed around by groundwater from a different spot underground? It's possible. It's just a matter of where is it coming from? And that's still something that the guys are trying to figure out, that no one's been able to figure out ever, exactly what they're dealing with down there. And all the searcher activity over the years, some of it was well documented, some of it unfortunately wasn't. Only adds to the challenges of what they're trying to do today to figure out what's going on down there, because because no matter what they drill into or what they dig into, when they can't see it above ground, they're not sure what they're dealing with, whether it's a man-made structure from the past, that searchers put in, or a man-made structure from the past that a depositor put in, or a natural feature. All they know is they keep finding man-made objects deeper and deeper and deeper than any searcher's been known to go. So it's evidence that something original is still down there and waiting to be completely figured out.
Let's go to John from Maryland on Twitter, who says, "Hey, Matty, question for Joe. Is there any chance they could do a detailed episode explaining how the searchers found the old shaft that you featured on Drilling Down? Could you explain to us why we didn't see more on that, and will we see more in the future, possibly, if things did move forward?"
Yeah, that was a weird shaft, and I would say yes, it's possible that we'll do more of that within an episode and try to tell the story. I think the guys are still trying to figure out exactly what that story is,
Right?
because they did uncover it, but it's still kind of it was. We have not placed it in an episode as its story. It was only featured there in Drilling Down, but the answer is most definitely yes. We may go back to it if we're able to continue with the show and try to tell more of that story and figure out more of that story so that the viewers can understand it. Because I know you look at it and you're like, oh my gosh, look how visually it just draws you in. It's a hole that draws you in, and I want to know more about it myself. So we'll see.
Like I said on that episode when we revealed it, I was like, listen, it might not be that significant in terms of what it is historically or in terms of the search, but visually, as you say, it looked like we had Hollywood producers coming and build it. It looked so incredible with that ladder coming out of the ground. It was just stunning.
Joe, I have actually a question from myself, because I ask everybody this. Since you've been embedded on Oak Island when you're there for filming, have you had any personal paranormal experiences yourself? Anything that was left you kind of scratching your head?
Only in my imagination, I think. I mean, a lot of people have stories. There's been ghosts that have been reported supposedly on the island. There have been, paranormal ghost hunters up there. In season 1, you saw us out there with a group from one of the local towns, trying to take measurements and trying to test energies and whatnot. When you're out in the country, you guys know it there in New England. I mean, Nova Scotia is basically the same. I mean, when it gets dark, it is so dark. It is dark like you cannot believe.
Yes.
And when you're on that island at night, and I've gone up by myself to try to walk back from, like, where the war room is. I've tried to walk back by myself all the way to 10X, and I got to about the end of Center Road, where you make a left and walk along the swamp.
Yeah.
And I decided that perhaps it wasn't the best idea anymore. I've heard rumor of sort of an entity that's been seen, that's kind of like a, for lack of a better term, kind of reported as sort of like a black mass.
Interesting.
I've never seen it. I've driven up to 10X at night, gotten out of my car and sort of stood there, and you're up there for a summer, why not? And I've not seen it. But so personally, no, I have not had a paranormal experience, but others have. So I don't know what if there is something up there, what I'm lacking that it can't show itself. But I don't know if you have to go up there with such an open mind to that kind of thing, or if it's just going to sneak up on you. Because I've never really had an experience with ghosts that I can speak of. So I don't know where that comes from. But again, I'm one of those people that I'm crazy like that. I want to experience it from a safe distance, mind you. But I've yet to actually have my own personal one-on-one experience with the paranormal on Oak Island.
Well, the amazing thing about the black mass anomaly or phenomena, Ronnie, we've talked about it, and we'll talk about it in future episodes of the show, is that as dark as it is, as Joe mentioned, and like, I've been out there at night with Joe, you literally can not see your hand in front of your face, that people that report these phenomenon, it's blacker than the blackest night that you could imagine. As dark as the room could be, these masses move they're darker than that, which is phenomenal. Let's go to jolly old England, Beccles, England. This is from Adam Joe. Hi, Maddie. Ask Joe, please, how long each episode takes to make with all the editing from various cameras you use, etc., in the war room, in cars, money pit, etc. That's from Adam in Beccles, England.
That really varies. We've had days where we shot almost an entire episode in one day, like when you've got John Chatterton diving to the depths of 10X. Where you're following something that can sustain an hour of television. There's times where we're pulling stuff from different days and just kind of piecing the story together, where it tracks in a linear way, where one thing leads to another. Not everything is shot, in linear ways, because we can only plan so much. The story on Oak Island evolves as reality evolves, So it really varies. There are times where it takes us a week probably to shoot stuff that we can put into an episode. There are times where it's 1 or 2 days.
Let's stay in England, Suffolk, England. This is from Matt. Hey, Maddie, awesome name. Thank you. Secondly, absolutely love The Curse of Oak Island and binge watched season 5. Can you ask Joe what the team plans to do with 10X in the future? Or do you think they've kind of put a cross through it? Whether there's another season or not, as they move on, if they move on, do you think 10X is done or still alive, Joe?
Yeah, my answer to that is I'm not quite sure. I know that they sort of proceed by majority rule up there in terms of where they want to put their resources, and the fact that Rick knows that Dan Blankenship believes so strongly in his heart that 10X is intricate to that mystery and very important to solving the mystery. I think he's always going to want to try to pursue that. Marty and Craig they're open to exploring if they can reasonably get the evidence to justify it. So I think that new technology is always coming out where the guys can try to get a look down there without having to, risk someone's life or do something that's going to cost hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars, just to find out a yes or a no answer. So I believe something will happen in the future. I don't know what that is. It'll be up to the guys.
2 more quick ones, Joe. This one I wanted to read because it's from Germany. This is from Kirchheim Tech, I believe I'm saying his name right. Kirchheim Tech in Germany. Joe, when did you first hear about Oak Island for the first time? And greetings from, I'm sorry. No, that's the name of the town, Joe. Let me do that again. This is from Marion and Michael from Kirchheim Tech in Germany. And they want to know when you first heard about Oak Island for the first time. Was it that Ancient Aliens episode, or did you heard of it before then?
For me personally, the first time I'd heard about it was when we featured it in Ancient Aliens. Yep.
Got it. Cool. And boy, it's become a major part of your life now. And finally, we touched on this a second ago, but this is a paranormal podcast in the end. So this is a great closing question, I think. Rick H. from Illinois wants to know if there's any chance, I don't know, you would let someone like me, for example, get into more of the paranormal aspects of what's going on the island moving forward, again, if we do.
Like I said before, and the way the show works is we're following the agenda of Rick and Marty. So I think that if they found themselves fixated on that in a way where they spent a lot of time doing it, we would document it. Again, in season 1, we got into it a little bit. We told the story of Dan Henske, treasure hunter who's been up there since the late 60s, poking around. He worked a long time with Dan Blankenship once Dan became a full partner on the island. He's had a couple of very notorious, I should say, encounters or incidents with something that overcame him, that made him feel like he said he was one day he came face to face with the hounds of hell.
Yeah.
He said that he had a vision that a priest overcame him, like the spirit of a dead priest that he believed is buried in the bottom of 10X overcame him. And he literally had a breakdown in Dan's kitchen in front of Dan, and Dan had to physically subdue him and get him medical attention.
Didn't he flee the island at one time in a panic, Joe, also because of that entity?
He did. I think that was a different incident.
Okay.
He thought that something within the money pit made him think that to be on the island was going to imminently lead to his demise. He stripped naked and swam for the mainland, carrying two of his most important earthly possessions, which at the time were a globe, which he also used for flotation, and in a plastic bag, the Priscilla Presley biography, Elvis and Me.
Wow, I didn't know that little detail. That's fantastic. I knew about the midnight swim naked. But wait, we've all done, the whole crew's done that, let's face it.
True story.
Yeah, so it's incredible. And if you look at season 1 of Drilling Down too, it's right on YouTube and stuff. Dave Blankenship talks about the quote unquote UFO, or ball of fire as he calls it, that no one could explain. This anomalous ball of light that flew right over the island and took off at a great rate of speed. So there's definitely stuff going on there that you can't explain. And yeah, man. All right, Joe, you've stayed longer than we even hoped you would. We appreciate it. The fans, I know, love this. Is there any parting thing you'd like to say to all the Oak Island fans that are listening to this and sitting on the edge of their chair, hoping you'll accidentally give up some information that you shouldn't have?
Yeah, no, I mean, I appreciate the opportunity to talk to them through you guys. The story continues for me to be a fascination and a wonderful adventure. I feel lucky to be a part of it, and hope to continue to document new finds, new theories, and new evidence for what may have happened on Oak Island. I think it's amazing the reach that this show has been able to develop. I mean, from all across the globe, people are into it and love watching this television show, watching Rick and Marty Lagina and their partners do their thing. So I say thank you to them. I appreciate the time from you guys, Ronnie and Maddie, for having me on, and stay tuned. We'll see what happens.
Joe, thank you, man.
Joe.
I've seen you work up close. You're a tour de force, and you're amazing. The team's amazing. The show's amazing. And just thank you. That's all I could say for letting me be a small part of it. It's changed my life.
Well, thank you, Maddie. And thank you, Ronnie. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Joe.
What did I tell you about
Amazing.
Joe Lessard, right?
Amazing.
He knows it all, man.
The fans are going to go nuts.
And we've only scratched the surface of some of the things on that island that a lot of people don't know about, some of the more paranormal aspects of that island.
It sounds like we need to go to that island and maybe do a podcast episode.
Monsterland from the War Room.
Mm-hmm.
I can promise you this, I'll work on it.
I love it.
We want to hear from you, and Monster Mail is how you can do it. Ronnie, how do they do it?
Monsterland at pod617.com.
Okay, Ronnie, we have a Monster Mail. This young lady, or I don't know if she's young, she wants to know what we thought of the series finale of Finding Bigfoot and our thoughts on that. Now, full disclosure, we know some of those guys.
Yeah.
And of course, the team here, Team Squatchachusetts, that helps power this very podcast. And by the way, if you have an experience in Massachusetts, contact these guys, Team Squatchachusetts. They're the best anywhere, but certainly in this area.
Yeah. And you can find them on Facebook. You go to their page, Team Squatchachusetts, ask to join. It's a closed group, but you'll be in a great community with other people that have had experiences, and also talk to other investigators that might be able to help you out with your particular encounter or sighting.
And they know these guys from Finding Bigfoot. And we've met a couple of the cast members, or at least I've met one. You've met a couple, right?
Yeah.
And you were actually on the show.
I was actually on the show.
Which we will get to.
Yeah.
But general thoughts on the series, and then the fact that it's ending, Ronnie. I'm interested in what you think of that.
I think the show has done a lot for bringing some awareness around the subject of Bigfoot, Sasquatch, and
Right.
And they included one of the encounters that happened in Monsterland that was featured on. But I felt like they did it a disservice as well, because I felt like they kind of people were watching the show, hoping to see something, hoping to kind of learn more about it, and just never kind of got to that point. So I think a lot of people are kind of relieved to see the show being done.
Right.
I had an interesting experience on that show.
Yeah. So let's talk about that.
Yeah.
You appeared on the show under what circumstances?
So this was season 2. It was episode 2. It's called Big Rhodey, and that was the name of a creature that they believe lives in Rhode Island area. And so that a friend of mine had found some tracks while he was out hiking with his wife in Monster and Leominster State Forest. They asked me to kind of come back with them and see if we can, one, locate the prints, and 2, see if we could cast one of those.
So these people saw tracks in Monsterland.
Yeah, they were walking,
and you helped them cast the tracks,
right?
And because of that, when Finding Bigfoot came around to find the Rhode Island Bigfoot out of Monsterland, they went to you.
So they had they were in town in Rhode Island, and one of the investigators, David Brake, PhD, who actually did this particular case in Monsterland and investigated it and concluded that this was something of Bigfoot, a Sasquatch origin of what created these 6 footprints. We successfully casted one of those prints, and we actually met with Finding Bigfoot, the crew and the team in Rhode Island at a town hall. They were heading to New York the next day, and they decided that they were going to change their whole shooting schedule and come to Leominster and do this whole segment on us.
Whoa.
The interesting thing, though, was that to keep with continuity, they decided to keep the story within the borders of Rhode Island or near the Massachusetts border.
Oh.
So there were a lot of details that it was almost they deliberately kind of threw off.
Interesting.
About the case. The one thing I did do, and I'm glad I did do it, was I went to the newspapers in town and kind of told them the story. So they had the story come out when the episode came out, and people were able to make that kind of connection.
Like, this isn't Leominster, right. This isn't Rhode Island.
They used the wrong photos that we gave them. It was almost like this deliberate kind of push, and I've heard of other people that have been on the show that have had that kind of similar experience.
Well, there's a fuzzy line sometimes between producing a good show,
right,
and reporting things that are going on.
Correct.
So yeah, I hear you. I would say this about the show. I think that the personalities are wonderful. The production was wonderful. We've met Cliff. Cliff's a great guy.
Yeah.
They're all
Bobo's
Bobo,
awesome.
super smart. They know their stuff. I would say this. If you believe, again, that Bigfoot is simply cryptozoological, that's a biological entity, that it is a North American ape, I would imagine you'd be fairly disappointed by the show because they haven't found nothing really,
right, yeah,
of substance. There's no body, all that whole thing that people always say we're critiquing it.
right.
If you believe, I think as we do, that there's a little something more to Bigfoot, then you might equally be disappointed because the show almost doesn't allow for that in a way, because how can you find something with TV cameras that is interdimensional or paranormal and just won't allow itself to be found?
And here's something interesting, and I think I can say this now that the show is officially off the air.
Yeah.
When they came to film, we were taking a break. We're in Leominster State Forest. One of the producers or someone on the production team, I was talking to him off to the side, and he said, "You do realize what Bigfoot is?" I'm like, "Yeah." And this is 2012. It's an animal, undiscovered. It's like, no.
That's what you said.
Right. And he said, "Nope." He goes, "They're interdimensional and they come in through portals." And I laughed in his face, like, "You're telling me this is hysterical." But since that day, every case that I kind of dived into, and it falls back on
Ronnie,
that, and it makes so much sense.
Ronnie, it's the only. I'm sorry. It's the only. Again, I'm the one saying we should stop apologizing for what our beliefs are. It's the only explanation because you have these compelling people, these compelling witnesses who have these incredible stories, and we never see one.
Right.
We never see one. We never see any real hard evidence.
So many stories of footprints going into open field and they just stop. Like the thing just went up into the sky.
Look no further than Team Squatchachusetts. And I don't know if I don't want to mention his name because I want to have him on the show. I want to have them both on the show.
Yeah.
But one of them involved with that team, high up in the Team Squatchachusetts, again, the local research and advocacy group for Bigfoot that is here, that works with us. They're both just salt of the earth guys. The whole team is. But one in particular I was talking to, and I made the assumption, because he is such a salt of the earth, outdoorsy hunter.
Yeah.
He lives in the woods, this guy, for all intents and purposes.
Yeah, true.
Tough Massachusetts stock, no bullshit. I assumed he would be offended by me thinking that it was not a biological entity.
Right.
So I gently said to him on our hunt that day, we went hunting. I said, "So you think this thing's an ape, right? I mean, you don't buy the paranormal thing." He's like, "Oh, dude, I don't know what else it could be but paranormal." And he went into his story and he said, "I got sick immediately. When he went through what he went through, he got sick." He's like, "You explain that to me. Like what ape could make me get physically ill?" And he goes, "I only learned afterwards, just like your case. I only learned afterwards all these things were cliche, Bigfoot experiencer, really paranormal events." So in my mind, there's no question that it is something more than that. So you can't really explore that in a television show, because if something is from another world and doesn't want to be found, it's certainly not going to show up when the cameras start rolling, right? Yeah. So it's almost an impossible task.
Yeah.
And they did a great job in trying to do it. I'm sure they were frustrated at times, like, "Oh my God, how many more of these? Can we not find something in a way?"
And I think they kind of busted the door open.
Definitely.
I think
definitely.
I think it's you look at Ancient Aliens and #1 show on History Channel. I think it's kind of broken some path here.
It's all good.
It's going to help other shows come in.
All good, right?
Help,
even if it doesn't,
it served its purpose.
Come with any right. Even if it doesn't come with anything tangible, it's all good because it's raising the dialogue of this type of thing.
Absolutely.
And I hope we have too.
I hope so.
And again, Ronnie, how do people find us? Socials and all that?
Social, Facebook at Monsterland Podcast, Twitter, Insta, Snap at Monsterland Pod.
If you like what you hear, please share it with friends. Thank you to Team Squatchachusetts. Thank you to Media Boss. Thank you to Pod 617. For Ronnie LeBlanc. Next week.
Yes.
We have a guest lined up?
We have an amazing guest.
Who we got?
Good friend of mine, author David Weatherly, who's written several books. The interesting thing about David is he's a shaman. And he's also works on different demonology cases, but he's also a big proponent of Bigfoot and that interdimensional kind of aspect. And so he's written several books called Wood Knocks, and it's about different stories and encounters. So we're going to have him on next week. Really excited. He's excited to be on.
Demons, interdimensional, paranormal, Bigfoot. All right, it's going to get spooky again. And that's it for this episode of Monsterland. We thank you, all you listeners, all you new listeners. Share it with a friend if you like it. Ronnie LeBlanc, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks to our guest, Joe Lessard. And remember, until next time, Monsterland. It's not a place, it's a space. We'll see you next time.